Today I'm going to show you how to do note renaming based off of the metadata. Now this is a way just to streamline your workflow a little bit to prevent double entries. So let's just go through an example and we'll explain it and show you how to do it later on in the video. Imagine that you are on your daily note. You are on the 25th and at 8 a.m. you have a meeting and you just call it whatever, untitled. So you can either fill in the name here and then click on it and create it and fill in the metadata. But instead, we want to save some time. So we are just going to create this untitled. And we're going to say that this is a meeting note. So we're going to use the meeting note template. And here we want to fill in a couple of things. The creator date is already filled in for us, but the participants is Alice and let's say it is D. Now, what do we want to change this note name to? Usually we would fill it in here, something like 2024, 10, 25, meeting with Alice and D. But then we need to fill in Alice and D again in participants, so it's a little bit of a double step. Instead, what we can do is we can run a script. I created a script called meeting note renaming script. And when I click it, it automatically takes the created date metadata field. It puts meeting with, and then in brackets, Alice and D. So it automatically goes and detects Alice D was part of this. So let's say we have somebody else, Elon Musk. To update this meeting note, we can just run the script again. I'm going to say meeting note renaming script, and you can see it updates. Or let's say D and Elon Musk didn't show up. We can just remove them and then update the meeting script with the meeting note renaming script. This is one way to update a note name, and the code behind it is meeting note renaming script. Looks like this, where I filled in a lot of comments to show you what the code does. But essentially, this is just the script that you run. It takes the metadata based off a specific note and it fills it in a certain format. So let's say D hasn't been created yet. We have a note renaming script for people as well. So you would then kind of create a note renaming script for different scenarios. The one that I just showed you was a meeting note renaming script. But let's say we want one for the person as well. Now in this meeting, we can see that Alice is created, but D is not created yet. So let's create D. We use the people template, just fills in a bunch of metadata. So if you go to reading mode, you can see that we have first name, last name, birthday, related, tags, summary. We have last contact, logs that they show up, tasks and questions. You can include the meetings that they're involved in here as well. But let's say we fill in the first name and last name and we would like to update it. So you can see that you would just create a new note if the person is not created yet, but you do want their first and last name to show. So let's say my first name is D, and then in my last name, I'm going to show you my middle and last name. And I quickly want to update this note name based off the metadata properties. So what I will do is use the people note renaming script. You can see it updated to D, middle, last. You can change this to be middle, last, comma, D first. Some people have their preference. And you just change code similar to this. So this is the code that we use. It's templated code. You can see that we have a variable that it creates, first name, last name, based off of this note's first name and last name. And then we just concatenate the two. So if you want, you can put a comma in there. And then if we go back to D, we can just rerun it. You can see D. Or let's say we want to have the last name first. Then we can just put the last name variable first, comma, first name. Now if we go back to D, we can change it. This is as changeable as you would like it. And for some reason that did not update, so let's try it again. There we go, middle, last, D. Now this is what we'll be going through. I am going to show you some of the functionality. I'm going to try to explain some of this templater code so that you can use this as a baseline and change it to other node renaming scripts that you want. Let's get into it. As always, we start in our Evergreen Vault. For those of you who don't know what the Evergreen Vault is, the Evergreen Vault is a mashup between the Work Vault and the Journals Vault that I have. It basically combines functionality of the two. And this is also where I'll just push in all the theory that I come across, all the functionality that you can use in Obsidian. And currently, we are in the Obsidian functionality and guides section, and you can see that we have update node names from metadata. And this is the node which we'll use in order to explore this problem. So we have the problem that we just explained. The solution is the templated code that we use. And then we have the two templates that we use as our use cases or examples. So we've gone through the meeting note script and how it works. Let's just talk through this code. So you can either just pause the video and copy everything, or you can buy the Evergreen Vault and you'll have this code, or you can understand it and write your own code. But essentially what this is templater code. It's the same as any of our other templates. So if we go to meeting note template, you can see that we have this part here, TP date null, which when you create a new meeting and you activate this template, because you don't want to fill in all of this information yourself, what templater does is it goes and looks at today's date and it fills it in here. Now this is kind of similar. It's similar things that it's doing. For this code, what it's doing is it's looking at the metadata in the current page that you're in. So let's say you create a meeting, you have the created date, you fill in the participants. What this script is going to do is it's going to take the created date and it's going to concatenate it with the participants in the meeting. You can see these little grayed out areas. This is just comments for you to understand it a little bit better. And I might just change it a little bit in order to make it a little bit more readable. But whenever you see gray in this code block, it just means that it's a comment that the coder basically leaves it for the person that might be using it. So we start with get the created date from the front-end matter. So our created date field is created. If we go back to the meeting that we created, meeting with Alice, for instance, you can see that this is the created field. And if you put this side by side, you can see that it takes templater, it goes and looks at the front-end matter, and it takes the variable created, this 2024, 10, 25, and it makes a variable called created date. So all that this does is it goes to the node that you just created, the meeting in this case, and it takes this and it pastes it in a variable that we can then use. The same thing for the participants. It goes to participants and it checks all the participants that's here, and then it just puts it into this variable called participants. So now we have two blocks. Think of it as a blue Lego block and a red Lego block, and we can use these Lego blocks in order to create the heading. So this is just then the blue, and this is the red, and then something in between. So you can just see how you can just block the things into what you want it to be called. Now this is a little bit more advanced. It's just checking if there's one participant or if there's multiple. And if there's multiple, like in this case, and we can see we have two people, but the meeting node is not updated yet. So here we can see that this meeting node is not updated yet because there's two participants. So let's just quickly update it by opening up templater or the templates and choosing our meeting node renaming script. And you can see that we have Alice, middle last D. So you can see that this might not work 100%, but you get the idea. So let's say if we have this one and we call it a people template to just be a little bit consistent. So let's say we just have a first name that's updated, people node renaming script, and we just have D. So now if we go back to this file, just give it some time to update as well. There we go. You can see that we want to update this as well. So now if we go back to the meeting note renaming script, what this does is it checks if participants as a string, if so wrap it in an array. So at first, the code just took one participant, but then obviously it can be multiple people in a meeting. So I wanted there to be a function that checks if there's multiple people and then put multiple people in a note name as well. So let's just quickly run this meeting renaming script. You can see that works as expected. And that just puts it in an array to make this collection of Alice and D and multiple people. Putting it between the brackets is a little bit easier. Then we have the extract only the date part of the creator date. So we can see if we go to editing mode, appearance, file, appearance, general, editor, source mode. We can see that the creator date is the date and there's a time as well, but we just want this first part. And what this code does is it just makes sure that it only extracts the date. The next part, obviously we have date only as well. So this is 3 variables that we have now. So we have creator date, participants, and date only. You can see this creator date is this first blue block that we spoke about. And it just splits it at the first space. If we go back to edit mode, you can see it detects where there's a space and it ignores everything after this date. So then we make sure that this creator date, this blue block, which is this one, and this one, and this one, same thing. And then we just create a new variable called date only, which takes the blue block and just trims it a little bit off. It trims the date off. Now we have the blue block, which is the date only, and still participants, which is the red block. So blue block and red block. Then the next one, map the participants array to remove the square brackets around each participant. So we can see that all our participants have square blocks around them. We don't want that. So what this does is it just replaces that with a trim function. So it replaces the square brackets with nothing. And then at the end, it adds a little comma to separate the people. Then we have just another red block formatting. So you can see that we have participants formatted, which is the red block. So we have participants. We format the participants in order to take off the square brackets. Then we have another red block formatting, which we just replace any of the special characters, which could be these quotes, also with nothing. So you can see this replace function is nothing. And then construct the new file name. And this is where we finally have the variable that we want it. And this is where we finally have the variable, which is going to be the new note name. We can see we called this variable new file name. We have the date only, which is our blue block, which should have this, which it got derived from this piece of the created metadata field. We fill in just standard words that we want in the meeting as well. So meeting with, and then we have a special format. You can see it is the formatting is quite specific, but you don't need to know what it does. You just need to copy it over. Then we have our red block, which is the participants formatted. So again, we have blue block, which is creator date. We can see what happens with the blue block. Creator date, it gets split in order to just extract the date part of it, and it goes into a new blue block variable. And then all the way at the end, we use this date only variable in the construction of the name. Now the red block, participants, goes through a couple of iterations itself. So here it gets wrapped in an array to make multiple participants easier for the code to understand. We take the participants again, we replace the square brackets, we replace any of the special characters. So you can see this red block goes through 2, let's say, transformations. And then we finally end up with participants formatted variable. And this is where this participants formatted variable is used. And then the actual renaming happens here. Templater, file, rename, new file name. And this is where it uses this variable in order to rename it. And that's how this whole thing works. Now, this is a mouthful for people that is not familiar with coding language. This might feel a little bit intimidating. But the beauty is, you just need to understand a little bit of it. And then you can change things and play around with it in order to get the note naming convention exactly to the thing that you want it to do. So for instance, if we play around, we can say we don't want this comma. Just go look where the code mentions that comma, and it's probably here. Well, let's say we want it to be a star. Now, if we're going to do the renaming script, meeting note renaming script, that might not have worked. Why not? Maybe it's a special character which does not allow. So let's try that again. But it's the beauty of trying things out, right? So that didn't work. So let's try another variable. Let's try a dash. Meeting note renaming script. That also doesn't work. Interesting. Let's revert back to the comment to see if this thing still works as expected. Yes, it does. So this definitely does something. Let's try A for Aaron. Meeting note rename script. You can see that it does do something. So there's some special characters. And the reason, the reason why this star did not work is because in the next participants formatted, we have replace all of these special characters with nothing. So it did work, but because we have the star here, that we don't want any special characters in it. And I think that is because we're not allowed to have special characters in the name in any case. But let's just see what happens for interest's sake. If you don't want to get confused, just skip until you don't see any stars here anymore. But I'm curious to see what's going to happen if I remove that star from the special characters that we replace. My expectations is that Obsidian is going to throw out an error because you're not allowed to have special characters in a name. So let's quickly check. Meeting note rename script. Okay, you are. But you see, that works. So we have star, and then if we have another person, Elon Musk, for instance, and we do the renaming script again, we expect there to be 2 stars. And that works as expected. So let's just put the star back and go back to the original one. So you can see that this is how you would update it. So let's say we want to change something in the note construction, the note name construction. So let's say meeting with, we want to have this as appointment with. And it's easy. You just go and look where meeting, change it to appointment, and then test it. Meeting note rename script. So now we have appointment with LSD Elon Musk. Let's just change that back. So we've gone through the code of the meeting note renaming script. It does look intimidating, but once you understand just at a very high level what is happening, you can start making changes, just like I've shown you. And then it gets quite fun to play around with it. So let's quickly do the same for the people renaming script. So let's say we go into D, and let's go to the people note renaming script. We have something very similar. We have a variable called first name and last name. And where does templater find this? Well, it goes into that note, that person that you just created. And it goes to the front matter, meaning the metadata. And it goes and looks at the first name variable. And then it takes that information that you put in there, D, and it assigns it to the first name. The second thing, it does the same thing for just the last name. So now we have first name, blue block, last name, red block. And now we create the new file name. What do we actually want this name to be called if we activate this template? And we want first name, last name, comma, first name. So determine the new file name based on whether the last name exists. So if it's empty, we obviously just want D. So this weird code does weird stuff. So let's just see if we put in a last name. Let's say it's DQ. People note renaming script. You can see that we have last name, comma, first name variable. And yeah, what this question mark is if there is a last name, use this. If not, just use the first name. So this is just almost like a logic. So if there's nothing in last name, meaning last name, question mark, is there last name? No. Then it skips this one and it goes straight to this answer, which is just the first name. That's at least what I think it does. So now if we go to people note renaming script, it just updates it to D. And then, as always, rename the current note. This is the actual action of Obsidian editing this. Now, that's pretty straightforward. I hope you guys found value in this and can see other use cases as well. Last thing that you obviously need a templater plugin to be installed. So if you use templates, this comes with it. And that's it for this video. See you guys in the next one. Strength and honor. Ciao.